tell me we were having drinks. I haven't got any. Nearly the new year now, isn't it?
I know. I can't believe this year has gone past so fast. And, at the beginning of the year, if we'd had any idea of what was heading our way with 3 prime ministers, Supreme Court ruling against us.
Yeah. Angela Eagle said in the comments, 5 education secretaries, 4 chancellors, 3 prime ministers, 2 attempted coups, and the partridges had to sell the pear tree to pay the gas bill. That was so funny. That was so funny when she said that at Prime Minister's question time.
I think we've got that on our TikTok as well.
We have got that on our TikTok. So if you haven't had a look at our TikTok, go in and have a look. What have we got coming up then? What's the first thing in January?
Our Bits and Pieces podcast for December, the last one for 2022, went out on Friday the 30th. So the first podcast in 2023, a nice one to start with, actually. It's Robin McAlpine's speech from the launch of Commonwealth's book, Sorted. That was a really good book launch. I was at that. It was very well attended. Robin McAlpine, as ever, gave a very positive speech, which we've captured. So that's how we're setting off. Nice positive start. And, the book, Sorted, got it in my Christmas
I know, it's
stocking.
huge. I must say, it's not the easiest read.
Full of good stuff, but it really deserves a bit of attention.
I think it's not an easy read. It's dense. It's pretty dense.
And it took them 10 years to write it, they say, so we can't be expected to read it in an afternoon, can we?
And of course, Fiona, you and I are always very prompt at reading whatever it is that we're doing interviews about, isn't it?
We are. Yes.
We buy the books and we immediately read them.
Yeah. Oh, like I say, so when we finally do retire, sorted for reading material.
I did do a bit of carrying on reading Jerry Hassan's book, Scotland Rising, the one that we interviewed him about a month or so back. I'm really enjoying it. It's really good. Yeah,
I've got about 3/4 of the way through that one as well. And I'm going to finish that, I think, before I start properly on the Sorted. Even though I did have a look at the pictures. But Jerry Hassan's book, very good.
Yep. So that's it's very, very readable, and it's got some really, really good ideas and thinking in it. Really good. So Robin is the first podcast in January, and what are we following up after that?
You and me being interviewed by Radio Yes Cymru.
Oh yes.
Sean Jobbins, who was lovely. We had a really interesting chat with him, didn't we? It was quite very interesting to see a perspective from people who are at maybe a different stage on the independence journey to where we are, but also how it looks to them looking in.
I was really pleased we took up that invite from Sean, and it was just really enjoyable talking to the man. And as you say, from the point of view of independence, maybe they're on a different different bit of the trajectory, but also as we realised talking to him, but then there's some things that Welsh government are doing that the Scottish government hasn't. I mean, they've got they've got a different setup now for people who own second homes in Wales, from the point of view of presumably it's done through council tax, and that we haven't got yet. I mean, it might be true that in Wales it's a bit even more of a acute problem for them, but it's pretty much of a problem in some parts of Scotland, and actually not even just the Highlands and Islands. I mean, Edinburgh, because of properties that get put on Airbnb. So it's sort of interesting that the Welsh government's doing that, and but we haven't done it. And
the Welsh government is actually using the blueprint that Commonweal came up with about having a publicly owned energy company.
That's right.
And yet the Scottish government isn't doing it. I do not understand. I'm sure we could go away and find out what the problem is, but
they said there was a legal problem involved in it when they tried, because they were going to do it. And then we found out that I think it was one of my friends who watched that interview of us with Sean, said to us, "Can you not go back and have another chat and talk about various other things?" And she made some suggestions. So I'd be up for doing that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they would as well, because they were really very supportive, of what we were doing.
Lots of possibilities from that.
Then it's time for our YouTube show of January, which will be the 17th at 8:00. It'll premiere on Independence Live's YouTube. And that one we're calling A Constitutional Conundrum, which is a title that we borrowed from Kirsty Blackman, I think. It's looking at the fallout from the Supreme Court judgment. okay, that's one door closed, so what are the other doors, and how do we get through them? We're still in the process of putting that show together, and we're looking at the moment of splicing some footage that we've got from Professor Aileen McHarg talking about exactly those, what are the legal issues, also some of the legal barriers, I think, as well. But also interspersing that with some of the footage from the most recent Opposition Day debate, because they were trying to have a discussion about democracy and Scotland's future, and the opposition parties were only interested in talking about ferries and how rubbish the SNP were. Completely different conversations going on. And then the podcast version of that will be the podcast that Friday.
Great.
The 27th will be January's bits and pieces. So we'll just have to see what happens in January that'll end up in that. We might want to mention for January is there's a proposed Time for Scotland demo on the 31st, which at the moment all I've seen about it is a couple of tweets from Leslie Riddick, and I think it's another 5:30 at night at Holyrood, and she's encouraging yes groups to hold similar rallies elsewhere. That's the anniversary of us being dragged out of the EU, and if we don't care, why should anybody else care about?
Why should anyone else care? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was having a wee think about what we might add into the blog in January. So so one of the things, the thing I thought I just started writing it the other day. It's just a bit of a follow up. Remember that podcast we did that was Radical Independence Campaign and Our Republic, and they were talking about what they might organise to mark the new king's coronation in May or in June. So I came across some information that's about polling that's been done. One's YouGov, but there are other polling companies, and they've been polling about support for the monarchy in Scotland. So I've got hold of some of those figures. I thought I'd do a blog post on that, just as a bit of a follow-up. Talking about the demos that Leslie Riddick got going, one of the things that she also broadcast was a video chat between her and Karen Oddsdottir, Icelandic. So it's Leslie and Karen talking, and basically Karen also just sort of coming in from a small independent country's perspective, and just a bit of a message for us in Scotland. So I thought we'd put that on the blog. And I think at some point we should maybe doing a little bit of looking at what support is there really for the idea that we don't need to bother about everything that's going on in the Supreme Court because of the claim of right in 1689. So Salvo, I mean, it's an organisation that's got a lot of people in it, working away in it. So I thought maybe a blog post just looking at it. Is that idea really a runner? Aileen McHarg does talk a bit about it on that on the programme that will be going out in January. So I might leave it till the end of the month. But there's also, people like Leah Gunn Barrett speaks about it, and
I was listening to IndyCar Gordon Ross. He was talking about some of the concepts in that, so I think it'd be a really interesting one for us to cover. I mean, it's one of these things that I would love it to be true, and the thing that strikes me with anybody talking about is they seem to have such conviction and confidence in what they're saying, but what I'm less cited on is where is the evidence that backs this up. And I think if we could marry those two things up, it potentially could be something very, very interesting.
Yes, I mean, I'm like you. I mean, if it was true, I mean, I would love it as well. And when it's raised as a possibility, you've got loads of Scots wanting to be independent and feeling really frustrated about the way things are going. So emotionally, it gives people something to kind of hang on. I understand that kind of aspect of it completely. I'm not so sure about if the claims that are made for it would really stand up. But that has also to be said, there was a lot of publicity around the fact that in some of the more formal aspects of King Charles taking over immediately after the Queen had died, there was a bit of it where he read out, an oath to uphold the claim of right for Scots. So it definitely has, it's rooted in there, and it's got some power. But whether it's quite the thing that the United Nations would pay any attention to, I don't know. So maybe by later on in January we might have a wee bit of a think about how to approach that.
Great. And let's just give a little shout out to the two unseen members of our team who do an awful lot of work behind the scenes and never get any credit for it outside of us. Huge thank you to Steve, our techie wizard, without whom we would not be on the air, I think it's safe to say.
I would not.
We'd lost about a week and a half recording stuff, and then we'd have given up. And the other one, the occasional member of our team who does some of our artwork, occasionally pops around and also makes me lots of coffee, is James. So
yes. Thank you, James. Actually, that's great. He's got a lot to put up with, that lad.
He sure does. He sure does.
That only leaves us, one thing to say, doesn't it, to everyone that's watching? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
If you're watching it a little bit after New Year, then, we hope you brought in the New Year in a very pleasant and happy way. And yeah, fingers crossed for 2023 here at home, but also, in Ukraine. And lots of other places around the world. So let's hope it's a more peaceful year than this one has been.